My name's Callie Braddock, and by the time the fire touched the ridge, I already knew it was mind-burning. Wind carried the smoke like a warning, curling black against the sunset like a signal flare meant only for me. My boots hit the dirt hard as I urged the mare faster, not caring if she pulled a tendon or stumbled. Home was down in that valley, tucked behind a fence line Pa built with his own calloused hands. And if there was one thing I still believed in, it was that good work should last longer than hate. But hate has a way of burning clean, through wood, through sweat, through years of trying. I reached the top of the slope and saw it. Flames licking the barn roof, the chicken coop already collapsed into glowing embers. The porch Pa died on last winter was alight like it was being erased on purpose. I screamed for Jed, but no voice came back. My younger brother was no fighter, but he was stubborn, same as Ma was. He'd sooner throw himself at danger than run from it. That's what scared me more than the fire, the silence. I jumped off the mare before she stopped and ran across the field, heat biting in my face as the house groaned and cracked in its death. I rounded the barn, boots sliding in soot, and that's where I found him, Jed, face down in the dirt. He hadn't died from fire. There was a hole through his chest that hadn't bled much, clean, efficient, and cruel. Shot before the flames ever touched the wood. His fingers were curled around the handle of Pa's old Winchester, like he'd try to lift it. Or maybe he had. Maybe he fired first. Maybe they didn't care. I dropped beside him, the air leaving my lungs in a single, broken sound. No, 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 Jed. My palms pressed against the bloodless wound, as if I could keep him tethered, as if the weight of my grief might replace the weight his heart no longer carried. Behind me, footsteps. I turned too slow. Something struck the back of my head hard enough to drop me. Next thing I remember, my wrists were lashed behind me and my boots were scraping over dirt as I was dragged like a sack of grain behind a horse. I tasted blood and ash and my own tears. Above me, a voice I knew even through the haze. Well now, Miss Braddock, you've been mighty stubborn. Marshal Wade Voss. His spurs jingled like sleigh bells from hell. He wanted my land for a while now. Pa never trusted him, called him the kind of man who dressed law on top of rot. I didn't understand what he meant back then. Now I did. You killed I gasped between bounces, my scalp burning from where his man had fisted a handful of my hair. He reached for a rifle. I got witnesses. I choked out a laugh, bitter and wet. You burn my farm to the ground and talk of witnesses. Voss leaned in close, riding his gray gelding beside me like he was out for a Sunday stroll. Some land's worth more without the bloodline attached. The world tilted then. Heat and pain and betrayal spun together until everything became noise. I must have passed out because when I woke, it was night. I was tied to a wagon wheel in the middle of nowhere. Cold wind bit through my torn blouse. The firelight flickered on four men playing cards and laughing, like this was just a job and I was just cargo. A fifth man stood apart. Tall, lean, face hidden by a shadowed hat. His name was Silas Creed, though I wouldn't know it until later. He was the kind that sold what he couldn't own and took what no one dare protect. She's got fire in her, one of them said, spitting tobacco. That'll fetch extra, Creed replied without looking at me. The ones who fight always do. I didn't cry. Not then. I stared into that fire and saw my brother's face. I saw the way Pa used to sit on the porch with a rifle across his knees. I saw every harvest, every fence mended, every blister earned by trying to live honest in a land that respected force more than decency. They could break my bones if they wanted, but they weren't going to take what I remembered. Creed turned toward me finally. You got any kin left? I held his gaze. No, but I reckon you do. He chuckled low, the kind of sound that made your spine itch. We'll move at first light. A rider came in late, dusty, quiet, alone. He didn't speak much, just handed Creed a coin purse and dismounted. I caught the flash of a long rifle strapped to his back and a scar down his jaw like a bolt of lightning had once kissed him and let him live. Creed nodded toward me. She's not for show. This one's going to need discipline. The rider said nothing, just stared at me for a long moment, then looked away like he was memorizing something. I didn't know his name then, didn't know his story, but something in the way he stood, silent, still carved out of dust and pain, told me there was more to him than what these men thought. And though my hands were tied, and my farm was ash, and my brother was gone, I held on to that one thing. That maybe, just maybe, the man with the rifle wasn't one of them. Not entirely. The wagon rolled steady through the night, its wheels creaking in rhythm with the groans of dry wood and tired horses. I lay in the back, wrists bound, lips cracked from wind and dust. My face throbbed where they'd hit me, but the ache inside was worse, deeper. My brother was dead. My land was ash, and now I was cargo. They hadn't gagged me. Silas Creed said it made folks nervous when a woman was too quiet. That told me all I needed to know about the men I was with. The stars above were so clear, it almost felt cruel. I used to sleep on the roof of the old shed when summer nights got too hot, counting constellations while Jed talked about building his own ranch one day. He never would now. They'd taken that from him. From me. A rider came alongside the wagon, tall in the saddle, long rifle slung across his back. Boone Maddox. That's what the card-playing men had called him after he'd ridden in late. Just Boone to them, like a dog they barely trusted but needed to keep around. He didn't say much, just stared ahead like the desert belonged to him, and he didn't have to explain why. He hadn't touched me, hadn't looked long either, but I saw the way his jaw tightened every time Creed spoke, like words tasted worse coming out of that man's mouth. You ever done a girl's hair up like a lady, Boone? Creed had asked with a smirk once. Gonna need her presentable when we cross the border. Boone didn't answer, just rolled a smoke and lit it with the sun in his eyes. Creed laughed. Didn't think so. Now you're kind of woman. Huh. Still no reply. I figured Boone had two choices. Keep silent or get dead. And in a world run by men like Creed and Voss, quiet could be a kind of defiance. I closed my eyes and drifted in and out, dreams bleeding into memory. Jed bringing in the last of the cattle, Ma's voice humming from the porch, Pa's boots kicking dust behind him while he whistled. I woke to rough hands yanking me from the wagon. The sun was rising over the hills, turning the land gold and cruel. We were in a near-dead town, one of those mining settlements that lost its silver and hope in the same month. Half the buildings leaned like drunkards. A church steeple lay snapped in the dirt. Creed's men tied me to a post outside the broken saloon while they unpacked supplies. Voss showed up soon after, riding easy with a smirk that made my stomach turn. She holding up? He asked Creed. She'll do. Pretty face, strong spine. Somebody down south will pay well for a piece like her. I spat blood in the dirt. You gonna choke on your own lies, Voss? He leaned in, grinning. Maybe, but I'll do it on a porch twice as wide as yours ever was. Boone stood across the street, leaning on his rifle like it was part of him. He watched, but didn't move. Didn't speak. I wondered what it would take to rattle a man like that. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything had already been taken from him. You really just gonna stand there while they sell me like cattle? I shouted, eyes locked on him. He didn't flinch. His gaze drifted away like my voice hadn't reached him. Creed chuckled. Boone's just here for the pay. Doesn't trouble himself with questions. Ain't that right? Boone lit another cigarette. Took one drag. Flicked it into the dirt. They talked around me like I wasn't human. Like my skin didn't bleed red. Like my breath wasn't my own. I wasn't scared anymore. I was past scared. Past hurt. All I had left now was rage coiled inside like a storm waiting on thunder. A buyer came just before noon. Sloped hat, greasy smile, two men riding behind him. He walked slow, looking me over like I was a horse. Lifted my chin. She's too banged up for show, he said flatly. She'll heal. Skin's not what you're buying, it's silence, Creed replied. What about the brother? Dead. The man nodded, tossed a coin purse to Creed, and turned toward the wagon. We ride in 10. That was it. My life, traded on a nod. I caught Boone watching me again. This time it wasn't blank. There was something beneath his stillness, tight, bitter, like ropes stretched too thin. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world went silent between us. Then he turned away. That hurt worse than the ropes cutting into my wrists. By dusk, they tied me to a rail near the old well while the buyer's men checked the horses. Creed laughed with Voss, talking about cutting the town loose with fire, just for old time's sake. Then came a sound none of them expected. A single rifle shot cracked through the air. One of the buyer's men fell forward, a hole neat through the side of his head. Panic spread like spilled whiskey. Guns were drawn. Horses screamed. Creed ducked behind the water trough. Voss scrambled to his saddle. Another shot. The second man slumped against the wagon wheel. Dead before his gun cleared leather. Creed shouted, "Who the hell?" But Boone was already gone from where he'd stood, like a ghost stepping out of his own shadow. I strained to see him through the dust and confusion. Then another shot, and the buyer's hat spun off his head before he dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. 3 men. 3 shots. Boone stepped from the saloon doorway, rifle cradled in his arms like a sleeping child. Creed raised his hands, blood draining from his face. "Boone, what the hell are you doing?" Boone's voice was quiet, steady. "Untie her." Creed hesitated. Boone didn't. Another shot rang out. Voss's horse reared and bolted without him. Boone stepped forward. I said, "Untie her." And this time, Creed listened. The rope slid from my wrists like a shackle falling away from a ghost. My arms dropped useless at my sides, muscles trembling, nerves screaming, but I stayed upright. Barely. Creed stood just beyond me, frozen stiff, hand still raised like he thought Boone might shoot anyway. Boone lowered the rifle slow, but didn't look at me. Not yet. His eyes were locked on Creed, that quiet fury still simmering under the brim of his hat. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, just watched. Boone Maddox didn't need noise to be dangerous. Creed shifted his weight. "Now listen, Boone, I didn't know she—" "You knew," Boone said, voice flat, final. "You just didn't care." Creed looked at me, then back at him. "She's just a girl. Land's worth more." Boone fired. Not at him. Just a warning shot near Creed's boot that kicked dust up into his mouth and knocked the lie right out of him. "You ride out now," Boone said. "Don't stop till your horse dies." Creed opened his mouth again, thought better of it, and ran for his gelding. I dropped to my knees in the dirt, ribs aching, throat dry. Boone finally looked my way, and for the first time, I saw something beyond stone in his eyes. Something bruised. Familiar. He came over slow, kneeling beside me. "Can you stand?" "I can try," I said, but my legs didn't answer. He didn't ask again, just lifted me in his arms like I weighed less than a sack of grain. I hated how weak I felt, hated that I needed him, but I didn't have the strength left to fight it. My head rested against his shoulder, and his smell, leather, gunpowder, wind, was something solid in a world that had gone to dust. He carried me past the bodies, stepping over the man who'd tried to buy me like cattle. I felt no sorrow, just a numb kind of justice. For Jed. For me. He laid me down inside the old chapel at the edge of town. Half the roof was missing, and the altar had collapsed long ago, but it was shelter. Boone lit a lantern, then knelt and unbuckled a worn canvas bag. "Water first," he said, handing me a tin cup. Small sips. I drank like I hadn't tasted anything real in days. Maybe I hadn't. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, didn't say much. I could tell he wasn't a man used to words. Silence was his armor, maybe even his punishment. "Why'd you do it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Poured himself a drink and sat across from me. "Too many times I didn't," he said finally. Didn't help. Didn't speak. Thought staying out of it meant staying clean. He looked down. "It don't." I studied him. His hands were calloused, scarred. His left thumb had been broken once, never healed straight. A man who'd survived more than he admitted. "They said you were a killer." "I was," he said simply. "Now I just shoot when I'm sure." We sat in the quiet, broken chapel, the wind pushing through cracks in the walls like whispers from another life. I wanted to hate him for waiting, for watching, for doing nothing until the last possible moment. But I couldn't, because in the end, he was the only one who had. Jed was just a boy. I murmured. He didn't deserve. "No one does," Boone said. "But out here, that don't stop anything." I closed my eyes. Images of the fire, of Jed lying still, of Voss's smirk. "Voss won't stop." Boone nodded once. "Then I won't either." He stood and checked the rifle, reloading smooth and practiced. I watched him like I was watching the sky gather before a storm. Low, certain, slow to move, but heavy with reckoning. "What happens now?" I asked. "You rest," he said. "We ride at first light." There's a woman in Pike's Crossing. Lucinda Holt. She'll take you in. I don't need charity. Boone looked at me. Really looked. It ain't charity. It's time. I didn't ask what that meant. Maybe I didn't want to know. He stoked a small fire in the hearth, just enough to warm the chill out of the air, then pulled his hat low and sat against the wall, rifle across his lap. I watched the firelight dance over his face. He didn't look like a hero. Heroes wore badges or uniforms or clean shirts. Boone Maddox looked like consequence, like what happened after everyone else ran. I closed my eyes again, not to sleep, but to keep from breaking. I was still shaking inside, like my soul hadn't caught up with the fact that I was free. Not safe, but free. When I finally spoke again, my voice was low, uncertain. You could have walked away. Boone's eyes opened just slightly. Could have. Why didn't you? He didn't answer right away. Then, you looked like someone who still had fight left in her. And that mattered? He looked into the fire. More than I expected. That night, I didn't dream of the fire. I didn't see Jed's broken body or the smirks of the men who thought I was nothing more than a price tag. I only saw Boone, standing in the dust, rifle in hand, saying 3 quiet words that had cut louder than a shout. Untie her. The sun rose slow, painting the ruined chapel in soft gold and copper. I sat outside with the blanket still around my shoulders, watching as the land stretched out wide and quiet beneath the sky. Boone stood a few paces away, cinching the saddle straps on a paint gelding, his motions exact and wordless. He'd already scavenged what little was left in the town, some oats, a clean canteen, a spare revolver. We didn't talk much, but there was an understanding in the silence now, like something had shifted in both of us during the night. Not trust exactly, but something close. I can ride, I said, testing my legs again. Boone looked over and gave a small nod. We'll take it slow. I stepped toward him, knees stiff, ribs still aching. The morning air smelled of dust, smoke, and pine, the kind of smell that settled into your skin, no matter how many rivers you crossed after. Where are we headed? North first, he said. Back roads through Sand Hollow, then cut east to Pike's Crossing. I hesitated. That where your friend is? He gave a short grunt that might have been a laugh. Lucinda's not exactly a friend. More like someone who don't ask too many questions. That all it takes now? He adjusted the cinch and looked at me. Out here? That's more than most. We mounted up without fanfare. The chapel faded behind us like a shadow at our backs, and the trail ahead curved into the brush. I didn't look back. There was nothing there worth grieving anymore. Just scorched boards and the ghosts of men who thought they could trade women like stock. The first mile was quiet. Then I said, you ever think about leaving all this behind? The West, the guns, the killing. Boone didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the horizon, but I could feel his thoughts working under the surface. I tried once, he said. Kansas. Thought I'd fix fences for a living. What happened? They needed someone shot more than they needed fences mended. I let that sit for a moment. The wind carried the scent of wild sage and dry grass, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled. It felt like the kind of day that could be peaceful if not for what we both carried. You think you're cursed? I asked. Boone turned slightly toward me, eyes squinting against the sun. You think you're not? I didn't answer. Maybe I was. Maybe surviving that fire, surviving Creed, Voss, and everything that came after meant I was marked. But cursed or not, I was still here, still breathing, and that had to mean something. By midday, we stopped by a shallow creek. I washed the dust from my face while Boone scouted the trail. When he came back, he knelt by the bank and filled the canteen, his movements slow, steady, like a man who'd learned not to rush anything that mattered. Jed used to talk about going north, I said. Said there were places where the grass stretched taller than a man, and no one cared who your father was. Boone screwed the cap on the canteen. He sounds like someone who wanted more than what he had. He did. He never got it. You still can. I looked at him. What about you? He stood, slung the canteen over the saddle. I don't think about more anymore. Just enough. We rode on. By evening, the trees grew thicker, and the road narrowed into a deer trail. Boone stopped suddenly, raising a hand. I pulled my horse beside his, following his gaze. Ahead, 2 riders. armed, leaned back like they owned the road. Boone's voice was calm. "You stay behind me." The men watched us approach, eyes flicking from Boone's rifle to my torn blouse. One of them grinned. "Well now, look what the planes coughed up." Boone didn't flinch. "You want to step aside?" The grinning one nudged his horse forward. "We want the girl." Boone shot him clean through the heart. The second man reached for his weapon, but Boone had already reloaded, aimed, and dropped him before I could even shout. The horses bolted, riderless. Boone exhaled slow, lowering his rifle. I stared at the bodies, then at him. "You don't hesitate." He turned to me, face unreadable. "I've seen what happens when you do." We rode the last leg in silence. Lucinda's place sat at the edge of Pike's Crossing, part saloon, part boarding house, all patched together with grit and stubborn hope. She met us at the door with a tired face and sharp eyes. Boone said only, "She needs a place. Just for a while." Lucinda looked me over, nodded once, and stepped aside. No questions. I turned to Boone. "Aren't you coming in?" He shook his head. "I don't stay long anywhere." I stared at him. "So that's it?" He adjusted his hat. "Unless you ask me to stay." I didn't say anything right away. The ache in my chest hadn't dulled, but something steadier lived under it now, like a spark where the fire had once raged. "Don't ride far," I said finally. He gave a faint smile. "Not too far." Then he turned, and the rifle brother rode off, dust rising behind him like smoke from a fire that wouldn't burn again.